Okay. And we're recording, and I will make you host. All right, there we go. All right, so it's 2:04. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us and doing this presentation for us. I'll give you the floor. I don't have any announcements, but guys, if you need help with anything, feel free to reach out to me. I'll still be here. So if you guys need me, Slack me or write me in the messages. But floor is yours, Michael.
Okay, thank you. So thanks everyone for coming. Maybe we can do a quick round of introductions. There's only a few of us. My name is Mike. I'll go into a little more detail about my background in the slides. But I did the boot camp I think I started July 2020. So getting close to 2 years, I think. TA'd for a little while, and then started working a year ago as a data scientist in Anheuser-Busch. Yeah. Anyone else want to go? Otherwise, we can just get started. And are you all recent alums, or when did you do the boot camp?
I can introduce myself.
Thank you.
My name is Sherry. I just graduated from the boot camp last December. So I am in this hot water of searching for jobs right now. Have had a few interviews, have a few scheduled next week. So glad everything's moving along, but hoping to hear about everybody else's experience.
Cool.
We can help each other move along in this process.
Thanks.
Sorry, just quickly say I finished the analytics bootcamp in January and am sort of slogging through the same process, throwing out resumes and, just trying to get some interviews scheduled. The first one of which, though, I realized very quickly, wow, I need to practice more on talking about the technical component of my projects. Anyways, a little bit humbling, but anyways, appreciate what you're doing here, Michael, to sort of help us keep our skills sharp in the process.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll get started. Share my screen. Okay, so first I'm going to start with just a few slides to kind of prep what we're going to be talking about. So I'm calling this the data science interview prep. So quickly, a little bit about who I am while I'm talking to you. I'm an alumni of the bootcamp. Graduated last September. That's not true anymore. I think this is the second time we've done this. I actually did this a year ago. So graduated September 2020. On the fly. TA'd for a cohort. I did a lot of interviews. One in particular was a notoriously challenging one, Pepsi, which I think not a lot of alumni got offers from, which I did. And that kind of piqued Vivian's interest. And she's like, okay, you must be pretty good at interviewing. Do you want to help share some of the skills you might have learned or help you while doing these data interviews? And so sure. And so put together this just to try to impart as much of my experience from interviewing, any tips and things that I've learned just to help you all through the process. Okay, so before I was a data scientist, I was a material scientist. I graduated from Rutgers in 2014 with a degree in material science and math. And then worked for many years at this company called Saint-Gobain, which if you don't know is a massive manufacturing company making all things from windows to roofs to pipes and things like this. So I worked in the R&D for 6 years. Somewhere along the line decided that I didn't want to continue being a material scientist and wanted to transition to data science. So my career transition took some time. During my time at Saint-Gobain, I decided I wanted to get another degree. They offered a graduate education as part of their package. So they helped me do this applied math master's. After I finished, I pretty much immediately quit January 2020. And And then the pandemic hit. I was originally going to start the boot camp like pretty much immediately, but I wanted, at the time, I didn't know the pandemic was going to last forever. So I thought I just, I wait till the pandemic was over and go in person again when it was ready. By July, realized that wasn't going to happen. So did the boot camp remotely. Did that from July to September, TA'd for one cohort, September to December. And then in January of 2021, pretty much started applying full time. And by March, started my current job, which is a data scientist at Anheuser-Busch. And then also, please feel free to stop me anytime and ask questions and things. We can make this interactive. Cool. So a bit about my job search to give you an idea of like what I went through and something. This is more or less, everyone's experience is different, but I'll just go through mine. So I applied to a lot of jobs, applied to over 100 jobs. And I tried to keep track as much as I can of how the process went for each of them. So 40 of them, I was rejected pretty much immediately. I think the funniest one for me was I was rejected in 30 minutes once. Obviously, probably automated or something. I made it to the first round at 12 interviews, at 12 places. Most of those were HR screens. So I think the first, or like 6 of them were just like an HR phone call, 30 minutes, just going through the resume, making sure I was who I said I was. A few of them, they sent immediately a tech challenge. So like an email with a link to a coding challenge. And one of the interviews I had was immediately with a hiring manager. So that was kind of unusual. Usually it's some sort of screening first. I made it past 7 of those. Most of those were tech interviews. So with someone on their team, a data scientist generally, a peer that spends an hour grilling you about technical questions and trying to see like what you know. And then a few others were take-home challenges. I made it to another 4 of those. By the end of the second round, all the technical challenges were pretty much over. The rest were one-on-one interviews with people on the team or hiring managers or HR. We made it to the final round. There were often more than 2 rounds or 3 rounds total, but kind of this is general. And then finally got offers from 2. So I didn't hear back from most. And I think, so take that for what you will. But I think the main thing is apply to a lot of jobs and don't give up. So a few quick tidbits on what I thought worked for me. I think referrals were, sorry, I just pinned my screen. Referrals were really helpful. So I heard back from less than 10% of the companies that I applied to without a referral. Of the companies that I did have a referral, it was like a 50-50 that I'd hear back. So I think that if you can, it's very helpful. I think, using your network from your previous job, school, from the academy, et cetera, like whatever you can to help get a referral, I think that's useful. One little bit of advice that I wished I had when I started this process was, in my experience, whenever I reach out to someone, kind of as long as I had some connection with them already, they were always really willing to help. I think people like to help people, and they like to hear like, it feels good to be asked for a referral because you're sort of, it's almost like complimenting them in the process. So I like generally don't feel bad about it. I didn't do any like cold calling. I didn't like try connecting with someone randomly and asking for a referral like that. I know some people do, and it probably is some success, but generally I was just using my own network. Volume of applications, I think like there's always a small chance that you'll hear back at all. I think it's somewhat automated, somewhat whatever, or just an HR person going through hundreds of resumes. Like there's no matter how good your resume is or how good the fit it is, there's some chance you're not going to hear back. So I think just volume is important. I had a strategy where I was doing a mix of quick applications where I was pretty much just doing like a LinkedIn fast apply or something, and maybe as minimal information, I would do 5 of those a day or something like that. And then for ones that I thought I was a better fit for or more interested in, I would do a slower application where I would like write a cover letter, et cetera. I still used a boilerplate cover letter to help write those. So I'd recommend doing something like that. There's a link here, and I'll send these slides at the end of this as well. one thing that everyone will talk to you about is ask you about projects you've done. So definitely prepare, choose which projects you want to talk about, think about how you want to talk about them. Yeah, that's like often the meat of a lot of these interviews are going to be what have you done so far, and can you explain to me and talk about it. And then of course, yeah, leveraging the Data Science Academy's career services. Yeah, their job is to help you get jobs. So I think there's a lot of alumni. I think if you are asking for things, they'll be, they'll help you. If you're never asking for help, they might not help you because they don't know if you need it. So the things that were helpful for me, resume reviews. I think my resume went through like a dozen iterations before it's finally done. Cover letter reviews, asking for help on technical challenges. So for these take-home challenges, which we'll talk about during this, maybe not today, but later on, you can ask instructors to go through, just say like, just a quick review of your technical challenge and see how it went. And sometimes just talking to someone in the career services or an instructor for a pep talk or something is helpful. I did that a few times. Okay, so what is this course going to be? So I think this is going to be 3 one-hour sessions over the next, I think it's split up every other week right now. So every other Friday at 2 to 3, we'll do a 1-hour session. We'll go over one of the core technical aspects of these data science interviews. Those are mock coding coding tests. So a take home 1 or 2 question type Python test. That's usually done on your own time without anyone watching or anything like that. Just can you fill out this test and then submit it and get through. The next is a take home data challenges. So these were common where they would give you a few days to in a data set and in a business problem and give you a few days to do as best you can to solve that problem. And then the last is going over interview questions. So I've compiled a list from the best from my memory of different technical interview questions that I had, which we'll go through together and try and talk through and hopefully build a nice study guide for everyone. Yeah, so each day we'll focus on one of these aspects. One thing I'll say, very little of anything of this should be new to you. I think everything we're going to talk about technically, you've probably already covered. This is really just like fine tuning and getting you ready for the final interviews. And of course, this is a work in progress. So like, as we're doing this afterwards, if you have thoughts about like what made sense, what didn't, or something was confusing, please let me know. And I'd love to fine tune this as well. Okay, so today, first I'll go over sort of the generic data science interview structure. So from my best of my memory, like how I remember most interviews went and what to expect. Then we'll do a quick review of Python, sort of get ready for these like coding tests. So yeah, it should all be review. But yeah, just to kind of prep for these things. Then we'll do a mock test. So I've prepared a few questions for a kind of what I saw when I was doing these quick coding challenges. We'll do together and then go over the solutions. And then finally, I'll give you guys some extra resources for those types of tests. We prepared a few for you and just have links to different websites that do that sort of thing. And then I think I'll also share the link for the interview questions that we'll go over next time. Okay, any questions? Feeling good? A few more people shuffled in, that's good. Okay, so I'll be in this notebook for the rest of the day.
I have a quick question. So
yeah, please.
Did you like before your technical interviews, did you ever ask like staff from the academy to help you prepare for like interview for a specific company?
Good question.
Like,
I didn't
do
for
run-throughs?
technical interviews. I think you can. I don't want to say for sure, but I'm pretty sure you can. One thing we did do, and I'm not sure if it's still offered, we had like 1 credit for like a mock interview after we graduated. Definitely do that. I found that really helpful. I went into it and it was a real data scientist who does real interviews, and he just could have went through what he does with real people during technical interviews. So I found that really, really helpful. So definitely do that. And I'm sure if you have an interview coming up, an instructor will be willing to spend some time. There's also these mentoring credits, which I think still exist. I did that. I used that once or twice. to prep for interviews.
Like,
So, yeah.
do you talk to the mentors that you made appointments with?
Yeah, so I made an appointment with and told them, hey, I have an interview coming up and I'd like to prep for it. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, this was a year ago, they either gave advice, or if you ask them to like set up mock interview, I'm sure they'll try and do that the best they can.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd definitely take advantage of those. And I'm not gonna talk about it today too much, but during this like take home challenges as well, you can ask the instructor to look over your solution. Not to like help too much, but just a quick, like, is this just built in confidence, and I can give you some advice. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the kind of the most generic version of a data science interview, from my experience, when something like this usually starts with an HR screening. So just a quick phone call where HR kind of makes sure that they goes through your resume and what you applied, and tries to make sure that it matches up with the job description, and to make sure that you try to judge that you're who you really are, and things like that. I never prepared for that or anything. I think just making sure that you're available and like feeling good for that interview is all you really need. Then often, this wasn't always the case, but often we would just get a quick test. Usually, or for me, it was always in Python, on the Python coding test. That would quickly go over, just test whether or not you know the language at all. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So kind of be the flavor of what kind of questions they were generally asked. I'd say I got like 3 or 4 of these. One of them was very challenging. It was for a hedge fund, and I don't know anyone who's passed it. I'm sure someone in the world does, but none of my peers or anything were able to get through that one. And that was more of like real, more software engineering questions and things of that nature that they would. Generally, though, for data science, the questions were pretty simple. And that's mostly what we'll focus on today. It's like, do you know what a dictionary is? Do you know what, do you know some object-oriented programming, what a class structure is and stuff like that? Okay, after that, which is usually automated, they would give you an email. It would take you to a link to do this test, and then it just quick pass fail. So if you pass that, then they would schedule a technical interview, generally an hour with a real person on the team, and they would grill you with technical questions. Yeah. So later on, I have from my memory types of those questions to expect from that. If you pass that, then they will often give you a take-home data challenge. Generally, it was 3 days. They would give you 3 days, business days. They'd also ask you to schedule it. So like one little trick that I think worked is like get it on a Friday, and then you'll have the weekend to do it. And then also Monday and Tuesday. They usually would respect something like that. And yeah, we'll do at least one of those together during this, not today, but later on. And it can give you another one just for real take-home challenges that I had. Then after that, often still other quick interviews with other team members was often the case. Usually shorter. Yeah, just other team members just to get to know you. And then generally, the last touch point was always an HR screen, a final HR. Usually there's a recruiter on the front end, and then on the back there's someone who's higher up in HR. Yeah. Yeah. So other than the HR stuff, the main things are this Python test, take-home data challenge, and the live technical interviews. Today we're going to focus on the Python test. Okay. So it's done through something like TestDome. This, I think later on you can go to this site. They just have tons of useful Python questions. I single out TestDome here because Pepsi used TestDome specifically, and some of the questions that they have in their thing were the questions that I got. So I think if you go through this and do a lot of the easy questions and maybe medium, that'll help a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Generally, the test screens were just whether or not you're familiar with at all Python. They didn't have anything like tricky algorithms or things of that nature. For me, the first question in one was something like an object-oriented programming question. So like they had a written class structure that didn't work, and then you had to figure out what wasn't working, and then and then debug it. Another question that I had was completing a function that was like dealing with information inside of a dictionary. So it's sort of understanding general how dictionary works and yeah, so pretty simple generally. I'm not going to go over the stuff that I got from the hedge fund. I didn't do it, pass it myself. Okay, so a quick Python review. And then we'll do that mock test. So in Python, there's some like core objects that everything is sort of built off of. Things like integers, floats, strings, lists, dictionaries, tuples, and booleans. And these are sort of the core objects that most other objects or all objects are built off of. Object is also an object, I believe. And so these are all, inheriting from the very base class of object. All of these objects have built-in methods that are useful. And a lot of them are overwritten in a way to make them more readable. So something like n plus n is the same as calling this, if n is an integer, which in this case I assigned it up here, it's an integer, is the same, calling n plus n is the same as doing the method add of n to n. You don't have to, this isn't very important, but just when you're doing something like n plus n, what it really is doing behind the scenes is calling the built-in add method from integer class, and then calling it on the other integer n. And that's kind of what's starting. So generally everything you're doing in Python, everything you're working on is doing stuff like this behind the scenes. For floats and integers, math that you do works essentially as you'd expect. So there is kind of these built-in methods that you can you can generally just do what you will, and it'll do what you expect. Strings have a lot of useful built-in methods. I will say that some of these Python coding challenges, it is useful to know these string methods, or at least be somewhat familiar with them, because they're often really handy and will do most of what the questions are asking. So if you spend a little time remembering which are some of these basic functions, that'll be helpful. Things like capitalize, which capitalizes all the characters in the string, or capitalizes the first letter, sorry. Upper converts everything to uppercase. And something like find, which looks for a character or a substring inside of a string. You can both, so this is just, these are all methods in the string class, and you can either call them from like the base string like this, or you can call it from a string object itself, and it'll act on the object. So these are the same thing, just one is calling the base method on the string s, and one is the string s calling this method on itself. Lists, another very useful method, or base object that you'll work with. I think one that may be useful for these sort of things is sort, which just simply sorts the objects in order from smallest to greatest, I believe. An important, or like something to remember, and it's often true for list methods. Lists are mutable, so a list object can change in memory. So when you're doing an operation on a list, it often isn't returning anything like most of these other methods. Instead, what it's doing is it's mutating, it's changing the underlying object itself. So it'll look slightly different. So yeah, we'll go through this. And then finally, some useful dictionary methods. These I think we'll have to use later on in the mock test. But essentially, D is a dictionary defined above. Yeah, just one simple key value pair. The items method prints all the key value pairs as tuples. The keys method prints all the keys separately, and the values prints all the values. I think when doing these problems, if there's a dictionary involved, knowing at least those three methods are very useful. Cool. Any questions? All review. Cool. Great. Thank you. Okay, iterators. Lots of Python objects are iterators, and iterators are essentially an object which has multiple elements inside of it that you can iterate through. In short, they don't always have an order to them, but they always have multiple elements that you can pull separate elements out of. And they all support things like for loops and list comprehension because of that. And so under the hood, when you're doing a for loop, you're like going through each element in this iterator object, and then doing something to that element in that iterator object. So for example, when you do for x in L, this is L is a list from above. It's going to just simply print all of the elements in the list in order. List comprehensions is another way to write for loops, which is often a little more efficient. Yeah, I'll say for these tests, efficiency wasn't very important in my, for the tests that I had, writing something more efficiently wasn't really the main problem. It was just getting something that worked. So I think write your solutions however was comfortable for you in this case. And don't worry too much about efficiency, as long as it works. Strings are also iterators. So if you want to print all of if you want to loop through all the characters inside of a string, you could something like this works. And you could also access specific characters in a string, treating it as if it was something like a list. Okay. And then I wanted to show you this behavior because it will come up later on in the mock test. When you're trying to pull things out of a dictionary, if you just do the same syntax as above, so like item for item in this dictionary, it's not going to print all of the separate key value pairs like you might expect. It's only going to print the keys. So in this case, you can see it's only printing A, B, and C. And so if you want to iterate through and get all the key value pairs, you have to do something like this, where you go through the key and the value, a tuple, for all of the items in this dictionary. Cool, that makes sense? Great, okay. Then of course, the last main type of object you'll work with are Booleans, and that lets you to do logical things in your code. So a Boolean is just true or false, and an if statement lets you do something if that Boolean is true, and it won't do it if it is false. So in this case, B above, I believe I set to true. Yeah, and so it does this, and then it doesn't print this. And then a lot of different statements will return a Boolean. So then it lets you do basic logical things like this. So like seeing which number is greater than another, if it's equal, if a string, you can compare strings and things like that. So that lets you do a lot of things in your code. Cool. Okay. So next, just going over the basic syntax of like writing your own functions. Always starts with def, the name of the function, the variables that go into the function, a colon, and then the logic. In this case, we're doing nothing to the object X. And so we're just going to return the object as it comes in. So whatever we place in here, it's going to just print the thing we put in. Yeah. Great. If you don't do anything, it expects a value, so it'll return an error. In this case, if we're really doing nothing, this will just pass. So it's no matter what you put into this function, it's going to just do nothing. Okay. Any quick questions on writing functions? Great. Okay. Objects. So this very quickly going over how to write your own object class inside Python. Similar, you start off by writing class, the name of your class, and then you would also put, if you want to inherit from another object, you would write it in here. In this case, we're not. We're just going to write our own custom class. Then there's a few functions. Then you could put methods that are going to be tied to your class, to your object. The init is a special method, which whenever you create your method, it's going, or whenever you create an object, it's going to do this first. And so when you call it down later on, it's doing this init method. So in this case, we are writing attributes. So an attribute is a variable that's stored inside of your object. And when you're referencing the object itself inside of your object, you always write self and then the name of the attribute. Yeah, so in this case, we're just putting stuff in stuff. And then we're also keeping track of whether or not another method was called. So this is going to be an attribute, which keeps a Boolean for whether or not this method later on is called. Another method just in there. This method, when it's called, will turn this attribute to true. So now we know that this method is called. And then you can also assign some other attributes to it if you want. You could overwrite attributes. So like when this is called, you'll see that now the my attribute is going to be changed and things like that. Okay. And then finally, there's a method that just checks whether or not this method has been called yet. Okay, so we'll go through this. So initiate it, just start it. If I do this, there's an error. Anyone have a quick idea of what may have gone wrong here? So I did something kind of silly here. When we call this, so this object is calling it on itself. And so it's actually passing in itself into this method call. That's why often when you're writing functions in this way, you always write self first, because it's going to be passing itself through it. Kind of messy, but important. And that's why you always want to write self there. Otherwise, it's called like a static method, and you would often do something. We're not going to get into this, but like you write like at static on the top or something, and then you can write it in that way. But yeah, so generally when you're writing these kind of classes, and when you're writing something in these tests, it's very common to have this sort of setup. So yeah, so after we instead do that, reinitialize it, this should work. So now we can pass 1 through and nothing will happen. And I think a useful thing in these like Jupyter notebooks and Python IDEs in general is, does this work in? Sorry, I'm not using Jupyter notebooks. I've used Colab because it's easier. And I forget, okay. I forget if you could do this. Sorry, well, I just wanted to show like something that I use frequently when I'm using in Jupyter notebooks and in other IEs. If you write dot and then use shift, I don't know how to do it in a Colab. Oh, there it is, okay. You can look at all the methods and attributes of your class. And this happens with every single object in Python, whatever you're working with. So I find this incredibly useful. Like if you're working with pandas and you want to like see what methods are called in a data frame, you could do this. So this is usually like when I'm trying to figure out what to do, I do this first, then I go to Stack Overflow. Chat. Yes, I will send this to everyone when we're done today, for sure. Okay, so now finally we'll do the something. So first I'll just to show the behavior. Let's do something. Has something been called? And we'll just show that it's going to be. And so it hasn't. And then if we instead do something and call it, you can see how it works. So that's generally how it works. Cool. Any questions on this very rapid review of Python? Cool. One last thing I'll touch on, you all know this obviously, but obviously a very important part of Python is that there are like lots of packages that extend Python that improve upon the base Python classes and things. And this one actually is interesting, sort of, because someone actually asked just sort of about it in my interview, kind of like why, is NumPy. So to show the power of NumPy, I think we're going to do two things. We're going to make an array of a lot. I'll make this smaller for now, of a lot of random numbers. And then I'll also make a list out of it. So in this case, I'm making the array first, a bunch of random numbers. Then I'm making this a list using list comprehension to go through this array, which is an iterator. So I can do that. And so then it's going to be two different things. I'll show you. So my list, and I think if I do, sorry, the list, and then my array we'll see is a NumPy array. So two different objects, sort of the same thing. Then if I were to do these like common built-in functions, like sorting a list, it takes some amount of time. And then the NumPy version is much faster. And so under the hood, NumPy has like done a lot of things to optimize these kind of things and make math and a lot of things much more useful and much faster. I think also interestingly, the NumPy array takes up less memory, which is cool. Cool. Any final questions? And then we'll get to this like mock coding test, and we'll try and do that together. We'll see how that works. I'll try to do it live. I haven't looked at them in a little while, so I might not do a great job. Okay. Okay. So in this case, this is a real HackerRank question. HackerRank's another one of these websites you've probably heard of before with like lots of different common Python questions. And this is pretty similar to like one of the object-oriented type programming questions I'd expect to get in a Python test like this. So in this case, we're going to make a complex number object. So we want to make an object that does a lot of the standard complex number addition and things like this. I think, okay. Yeah. Oh, this is, okay, fill in the blanks. Yeah, so it's, oh no. I'm so sorry. I think I actually filled this out already because I've done this before. I'm sorry. That's okay. We can go over the solution. That's helpful. Okay. Well, okay. We'll go over the solution. Cool. Does it work? Sorry. Yeah. So in this case, we set up a complex object. I don't think you really need this object in there. This might have been how it was set up in their question when they made it. Every complex number is two real numbers, essentially, a real part and an imaginary part. And so when you initialize it, we assign the real part and the imaginary part. I think if, in this case, we're just filling out to make sure it works. If you wanted to make like a nice version, which was safer, you would check to make sure that these are numbers that you're putting in here, not like strings or something like that. The addition, when you're adding two complex numbers, it returns another complex number. So in this case, we're just returning another complex number where you're just adding the real part of the first one with the real part of the second one, and then the imaginary part of the first one with the imaginary part of the second one. And then making another complex number out of that. If you're doing subtraction, it's the same idea. Just instead of addition, you're doing subtraction. It's very simple. Multiplication, it's a little more involved, but it's still, I think, with these sort of links, you can just see what the math is and kind of go through it yourself. So again, it's another complex number where you're multiplying the real part minus the imaginary part, and that's the real part of the new complex number. And then the imaginary part of the new complex number is the real times the imaginary, and then plus the imaginary times the real. Kind of complicated. If we go to one of these links, it'll be clear what that math is. You don't need to memorize exactly how complex numbers work or anything like this. It's just an example to show how you build something like this. Okay. Division is a little more complicated, but essentially it's using something called a conjugate. So there's another method here which builds the conjugate easily, which is just the same as the input complex number, but with a negative imaginary part. And then there's this math to finally make the do division of a complex number, and another one. Okay, sorry I filled that out already. I wish I went through this when we did it together. Any quick questions about what's going on here? Do you feel confident that given something like this with a few, I think my guess would be something where they would like leave out something, one of the functions like this and have you do it. I think given that, yeah, and like roughly 15 minutes to be able to figure out what to do. That's roughly what's being asked. Cool. Okay. Last question, and this I remember is an actual, this is the like exact wording of a question that I got, was to implement a function called group by owners, which takes in a dictionary, which contains the owner of a file's name and all the files that they own, I believe. No, that's not, yeah. So it takes in a file name and then the owner of that file. P is the file owner. The value is the name of the owner. And what we want to do is return a dictionary, which contains a list of all those file names for each owner name in order. So example, yeah, if you get this list of key value pairs, so like some file name input with which is owned by Randy, and then something by encode by some guy named Stan, the group by owners will return just the name as a key and all their files as a list. Anyone want to try, help me fill this out? Are there any functions that we like used before that might be helpful to do something like this?
Would you somehow retrieve the owners first as a list, or put it in a set so that you don't repeat, and then
so something like
at this point.
Yeah. And I think like when doing something like this, just like, yeah, starting to get things down. Again, it doesn't have to be like pretty or efficient necessarily. I don't think they're going to reach in most of these like take home Python tests where it's just filling out questions. They're not going to read your answers generally. I think it's like, does the automated testing thing say you did it or not? So yeah, I think that let's do that. So you want to make a set that is so like owners or something. We'll make a owners equals files dot values, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's I think to like help, let's just do this. And I do recommend, like when doing something like this, they'll have an IDE to do it in. I have another tab open with a Jupyter notebook or something for you to do like scratch work in. I found that very helpful. So they might have a Jupyter type thing where you can make a new cell and do something like this. They also might not, where you can only do like, you can only fill in this and it's going to check whether or not it's right. So I definitely recommend doing stuff like this, where we're just going to be doing some scratch work as we go. So files, values, and then owners. Okay, great. So now we have this list of all the names. So yeah, that looks like the right way to start. Next thoughts? Maybe we have this list, we have the names. Now we want to attach all the files for the name to each of the owners. Some time. Cool. So maybe we'll just simply do a for loop to for something like that. So now we're going to go through each of these, and then we want to make a list of actually, it's like almost easier, I think, just to do it this way. So this is actually a harder way to do it than I thought. I have the solution, so in like a second, I'll open it up and we can go through it. But yeah, cool if we could do it together. But I think this is okay. Start. I think one thing that when we're doing something like this, is using the items. So this, or we're trying to simply. So like, for example, like one little thing, so I was just playing around. If we wanted to switch the keys and the values, we do something like this, where we are just switching the value and the key of the key value in the files and the items. So now we're like looping through this. And so that already looks, a little closer to where we were before. So now we have, Randy input. Oh, I like what you said before. So you said a set. Okay, that's actually nice. And I don't know if that works. Yeah, great. Okay. So that's great. And now we want to loop through this sort of and pull out all the files. Sorry. In a minute, I'll just go to the solution. Right, so if we have that flipped version, it's messy. Okay, in files, then we can access. Does that work? No, it doesn't work. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, that's okay. I'm going to talk through the solution because it's easier than trying to do it live without doing it in a long time. So this is a nice, pretty one line. You don't have to do it in one line. It doesn't make a difference. Solution. So in this case, we are building another dictionary using list comprehension, where each key value pair is the owner. And this is pulling from, yeah, exactly. So the set files value. So we did it the same way. Yeah, it's exactly perfect. So it's looping through that and then building this nice list where we pull out F from the files and items if O is equal to the owner. So, okay, we were actually pretty close, but that's okay. So then this is essentially, so let's pull this out maybe. Is it generally clear what's going on here? No question. So let's see what happens when we do something like this. Okay, that's the solution. I see. Sorry. Great. Okay. Cool. And so then you can see kind of clearly that this is building this list with all the keys from the key value from the dictionary where the value is equal to any. And so then when you loop through this nice set, it just does this for everything. And you can test it, roughly works. Cool. So that's those two questions. I think it was like a 30-minute time period to do both of them. Is roughly what I would expect for something like this. So yeah, in the kind of the standard data science interviews I had, that was like roughly what the expectation was. Let's go back. How does everyone feel about that? Just quick. And to be clear, you definitely don't have to end up with a nice looking thing. This doesn't really matter. Just anything that works. And so if it was built out in multiple steps and things, it doesn't make a difference. And so prototyping and doing things is a fine way to do it. Cool. Okay. So some of the resources. So I think like there's lots of resources online. I think like coding challenges is like become a very important part of like jobs in tech, obviously. So there's a whole industry and things around like taking these types of quests and practicing and learning. So this site was very similar. Yeah, so I talked about testing already. It's like very similar to a lot of the questions I saw. I'd recommend doing a lot of the tests. I believe that there's, yeah, just Python tests. You take practice tests. And I would, yeah, so I would do most of these free questions. Yeah, that's changed. We've also set up a bunch of free tests for you all to try. So I believe this still works, but I mean, just let me know where if you click on these links, and I'll share this notebook at the end of this, you could register and then take a like simulated test. I'll be honest, I haven't seen these. We set these up a year ago. I haven't looked at them all. I think they're roughly on a similar challenge as these, but don't like beat yourself up if they end up being a lot harder or something. I don't remember. Other things I would go through, I think, yeah, the bootcamp does do a lot of curriculum which matches what you'd expect. That's actually more relevant for next week when we go over like the technical interviews. Most of the technical interview questions sort of kind of neatly match up in the curriculum in a way that was really helpful. And a few other coding websites that I found useful are HackerRank and LeetCode. So just places to start. I'm sure you've heard of more, but yeah. Yeah, and generally, and a thing like HackerRank or LeetCode, I think like the easy questions, I'd say, are generally what to expect from like a data science interview. I haven't been on a long time. The medium and definitely the hard are things I wouldn't plan on needing to do in like a timed period like this. Yeah. Okay. So we've got like 2 minutes. Any questions? I think, so next week, I'll share this notebook. This also has a link to a list of interview questions. And definitely take a look at it beforehand. I think basically next week, was what I did last time. We're just going to go through all of them and talk through each of these questions together. And then we can write down and kind of make a study guide together. and that should be helpful. And then the following week, so after that, I'll give everyone a take-home test, one of the real take-home challenges that I had, give you 2 weeks to do it, and then we'll go over the solution together in the end. So lots to do. And so I think hopefully by the end of this, you'll kind of have a little bit of experience doing all of the different things you'll expect in data science interviews. Cool. Any last questions, feedback, thoughts?
Hey, Michael, just an update. It will be in 2 weeks that you will
Right.
present again.
Great. Yeah. So yeah, 2 weeks from now, we'll do this interview questions, and then the following 2 weeks, we'll do the last take-home test.
Well, Michael, I really appreciate your time. Is it okay? Well, I'll email you later about that. I'll definitely be sending a follow-up email with the documents and the recording of this video in case anybody wants to check it out. If you guys need us, please reach out. Otherwise, have a great holiday weekend, and I will speak to you all soon.
Thank you, everyone, and good luck
Bye.
on
Bye,
your
guys.
interviews. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks again. This is awesome.
Thank you. Yep.